Thanks, everyone. I think that we are ready to start again. So very glad to have you guys here for this last panel of the day, and it's on quantum breakthrough, likelihood, and impact. And this is an issue that has been coming up quite a bit throughout the couple of days. I mean, we've been hearing often about quantum computing. Of course, for something that doesn't exist yet, it's it's a big hot topic. And I think that as I've was discussing it in advance of the panelists, I mean, for a technology that's still at an experimental phase, it's quantum computing is certainly no stranger to the limelight. If quantum computers work, they stand to solve some of the toughest computational problems in finance and beyond, from Monte Carlo simulations to complex optimization, and yes, breaking all those cryptographic algorithms that keep confidential data safe across the financial system, which I think is that's the context in which we often are hearing about this. What could this mean? What would this mean for security? What would this mean for the crypto sector, which, as the name implies, is built on cryptography. So there are substantial opportunities and huge risks from hypothetical future quantum computers. If only we can get those qubits to work for real-life purposes, all while cooling them to near 0 degrees Kelvin, which I gather is one of the big hardware challenges that a lot of them are working with. So the questions for this panel broadly are, how likely is a quantum breakthrough to happen? In what time frame and for what use cases? How can the public sector and private sector best prepare for this world? And most importantly for me, do I need to start shredding all of my encrypted information and panicking? And we'll talk about that aspect of it a little bit as well. So I'm very happy to have this panel with us today. So I'm going to just introduce them starting on my right. So immediately next to me is Samuel Palmer, who is the head of financial engineering and quantum developer at Multiverse Computing. Perhaps one of the cooler firm names out there. Immediately invokes images of some movies that we're well aware of. Right. One of me. Yes. Right next to Sam, we have Corey Zarek, who's vice president for North America at Apolitical. So Corey specializes in explaining really tough stuff to public sector officials, which I think is a very useful skill to have represented on this panel. Next to Corey is Taylor Reynolds, practice manager, digital safeguards at the World Bank, so new in the job. And Tad and I know each other from the past, from his work at MIT, where he's worked on cyber issues. But now he's relocated from Boston to here in DC and is working at the bank. And finally, we have Varlam Ebanoidze, who is the head of the Financial and Supervisory Technology Department at the National Bank of Georgia. We're not talking about the state of Georgia, we're talking about the country of Georgia, just to get that out of the way. So very glad to have Varlam here and to get the perspective of a very technology-forward country and central bank that have been thinking about these issues, and I think add a very useful perspective. So I think we can jump right in, and we're going to start with Corey. Corey, again, you've helped to explain complex things, including quantum computing, in simple terms for wide audiences of public sector officials. So knowing that the background on these issues varies quite a bit, how would you define a quantum breakthrough, and how will we know it when we see it?
Well, thanks, John, and thanks for having me today. So I'm with Apolitical. We're an organization, a global organization, a network of public servants that helps governments get smarter on all sorts of topics, from AI to quantum computing to resilience and sustainability and energy and the environment, just a whole range of topics. Governments touch everything, and we need public servants to be ready for all the things that come our way. So we team up with public servants in 160 countries. We reach about 40 million public servants around the world. And through that, we learn a lot about what they are interested in, kind of the level of depth they're looking for when it comes to topics. And we really try to meet public servants kind of where they want to be. I'm a former public servant myself. I was Deputy Chief Technology Officer of the United States. I also helped to run a team called the U.S. Digital Service. And I left government about a year ago. And so I lived the generative AI moment in time from those perches. And while, of course, very smart people in governments are always ahead of the curve and ready for what's coming our way, the vast majority of public servants can kind of be taken by surprise when it comes to topics like generative AI or now quantum computing. And so, promise I will get to your question. But so as public servants who we're talking with are thinking about this topic and kind of trying to figure out where to begin, they're really just looking for the foundational principles. They're not looking for the deep technical expertise on the topic, and really want to be sure that they can be prepared for whatever may or may not come our way, and when. And so we have developed, and come see me after if you're interested, a course on quantum computing, free for public servants, that is really meant to help public servants kind of get ready and be prepared for that breakthrough moment, whenever and whatever it may be. And so I think like that, for us at Apolitical, for me as a former public servant, that's really how we think about quantum, about a quantum event, about a quantum breakthrough. It's about the skills building and the preparedness that we can be doing now, that we should be doing now, the conversations we should be having, the things we should be learning. And I look to my subject matter experts next to me here as the folks who actually have the skills and depth to explain these topics to us. But so for what we should be thinking about as public servants or policymakers or anyone in the space when it comes to a quantum breakthrough, the short of it is just how can we understand the basics so that we can be ready when that moment arises, if it does.
Very good. Thanks, Corey. So we'll move to Tad next. And Tad, I was maybe a little too flippant by saying it's a technology that doesn't exist. Of course, there are a lot of firms that are building actual hardware already. So there's various models with very different numbers of qubits, but there are vastly different estimates of a practical fault-tolerant quantum computer that can solve real-world problems. I mean, perennially it seems to be like 10 to 20 years off, or depending on who you're talking to, maybe shorter or maybe longer. When is your best guess of when a breakthrough could happen, and what will it mean?
I'm going to give you the answer. No, I'm not. So, thank you. That's a great question. So I work at the World Bank now. I spent 10 years working in CSAIL at MIT, which is the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab. And the group that I was in CSAIL shared the floor with the cryptographic department, with all the cryptographers. So it's called the Theory of Computation Group. And so Ron Rivest, the R of RSA, is actually in that group. So whenever we do things, we have these cryptographers that we can kind of tap into about what's going on with things. So last week we held a conference at MIT, at the Boston Fed, that we do with the Federal Reserve and with MIT, and we say, how do we measure cyber risk? And as part of that discussion, we bring in cryptographers to talk about quantum, because the banks are on the cutting edge of this, and if there's any institutions that need to be kind of thinking about this, it's probably the banks and other digital authorities. So the cryptographer got up there, started talking. He's a very famous cryptographer, and he said, yeah, we're not even sure this quantum's going to work. And you saw all the jaws of the bankers around the table, and the Federal Reserve like, what? Here's a cryptographer from MIT telling us that we're not sure this is going to work. And he said, yeah, we're past it's past the theoretical stage. We've shown that we can do these things. We've shown that we can do them in small scale, but this has now become an engineering problem. He's like, this is no longer a theoretical problem. It's an engineering problem, and that is yet to be determined whether or not we can do this. So just to put things in perspective, about now, the number of qubits, if I'm up to date on this, the number of qubits that have actually been pulled together at once is about 1,000, if I'm about right. And among those 1,000, which are physical qubits, you've got about 20 logical. So you pull them together, and you've got 20 that can work together. Seems like the state of the art right now. And so it is possible, but whether this is going to be able to scale into the thousands or the millions is still to be seen. So I guess that would be my answer on the question.
You're not going to give us a precise number of years?
2037. There you go.
Okay. So, Sam, we'll move to you next. So, Multiverse Computing develops quantum and quantum-inspired software to solve complex industrial challenges among a broader portfolio of work, including in financial services. So, based on that work, how long do you think it'll take before quantum computers can solve real-world problems?
Yeah, I think Thank you for that question. Yeah, this is the bane of my life, and most of my stress of my job is people always come to us and it's like, how can we use quantum computing? And it stresses me out to try and figure out how can we use quantum computing. And I think this comes down to a lot of it is an engineering problem. And I think quantum is the word of the year. But I think there's a lot of hype in where people think the hardware is to where the reality of the hardware is. So, and I think coming back to what Ted was saying about people saying that, experts saying quantum computing, we're not even sure it's going to work. But I think there's a lot of potential still considering and understanding what are the algorithms you can use. So this is what a lot of the work I now focus on is kind of towards quantum. So how can we look at problems we have now and pose them in a way that could work in a quantum computer? And even inside there's a lot of intricacies you have to consider, especially for practical quantum computing. And a lot of this is you can't just take a generic problem, slap it on a quantum computer and say it's going to be better, it's going to be faster. You actually have to look really algorithmically, what can't a classical computer do? What do classical algorithms actually struggle with? Because you've got, even in optimization, you have a lot of very good optimization packages now. So you really have to throw a lot of tricks to make the problem hard. So you kind of really have to get down to that depth of where can we throw up these classical algorithms. And I also want to quickly just mention, you said about simulation. So I think this is another myth I don't like, is a lot of people, especially in the bank, who are like quantum Monte Carlo, quantum simulation is going to be the biggest thing. The problem there, again, is an engineering issue. That theoretically you can get a polynomial gain, but to get that gain, we've got to have, again, perfect qubits. You've got to have thousands of them working perfectly. And that's going to cost a fortune to do. And the accuracy you're going to gain compared to what you can do on a modern GPU is going to be marginal at the end of the day. And again, you've got other things you have to consider is mapping, and even so you can focus on the algorithm level, building on the quantum computer. But then the other thing people forget about is the pre-processing level. I've got to build my quantum circuit. I've got to encode my data in the quantum circuit. And more often what we find is by the time you do all of these steps, you might as well have just done your problem classically on a GPU. So this is kind of where we can say we're moving towards the QPUs, and I think there will be use cases where we can use them in maybe a couple of years' time, but it will be more around chemistry, where we can do very natural encoding. Anything with actually we need to put real data on there. We're going to wait also for the QPU, but then we need the QRAM infrastructure as well. So a laptop isn't just a CPU. It's a whole system. So we've got to build all of those other parts before we can get to something which you can actually use on a daily basis to find an advantage. So the long and short of it is, I think be prepared, but don't panic.
Very good. Okay, thanks so much, Sam. So Varlam, at the National Bank of Georgia, you describe yourselves as a FinTech-friendly regulator, and you've invested quite a bit in new technologies, for instance, in cloud computing, where you've been leading. So do you have the same approach to quantum, or do you think that this technology is fundamentally different and requires a different approach?
Thank you very much for the question. It's a pleasure to be part of the panel. While formulating my answer, let me stay in the scope and boundaries I operate. So I am responsible for open finance ecosystem development in my country. And I am sure, and I was confident for the past decade, that the cloud was one of the key allies and friends for achieving my mission. Open finance ecosystem, and I'm not sure about the quantum, whether it's my friend or not, because you are dealing with lots of unknowns shortly, and it's this notion of harvest now, decrypt later, makes this technology fundamentally different, and strategic approach to this. It's about not like having a waiting strategy, like you could allow for cloud computing and just losing competitive advantage, but you could allow weighting strategy. And this technology is fundamentally different. As mentioned, you have lots of unknowns. Also, lots of hope is about privacy-enhancing technologies for unlocking potential of open finance ecosystem, like homomorphic encryption, multi-party computation, other types of privacy-enhancing technologies, zero-knowledge proof. They are all built on RSA, right? And they potentially all are vulnerable to Shor's algorithm and quantum. So short answer is yes, cloud and quantum is fundamentally different, and we need to have fundamentally different strategic approaches.
Very good. Thanks. So let's move to the next round, and we'll go back to Corey to start with. And so, Corey, we heard from Tad that it's 2037. We're going to hold you to that now, 2037. That's the year of the quantum breakthrough. So now we have, hypothetically, a working quantum computer that can solve real-world issues. But if we did have that in the first place, what would be the thing that we would actually want to do with it? If you were advising the public sector or the private sector, for that matter, what would be the first thing that you would ask? You would want it to actually help with?
That's an impossible question, John. It's a real mystery, right? The application is still relatively unknown, and there's lots of great opportunity for speculation around that, which I, again, leave to my subject matter expert colleagues. But I think maybe I'll take your question a little differently, which is, let's say it's 2037 and this new era is upon us. What do we need to have done between now and then to be ready for that moment in time? And I'll come back to a theme I think we've all shared here a bit around just preparedness and awareness. And taking it from the public sector perspective, governments have a tremendous responsibility to prepare for all of the risks. That is the job of government, is to see and assess and mitigate risk in a lot of ways, and also seize the opportunities, right? And we have a lot of I think, great expert literature and research on what both those risks and opportunities might be. I'm delighted to hear that cryptographers are not yet too concerned, but there will certainly be some risk mitigation to do around cryptography. And also just opportunity seizing. So we, Apolitical, held a roundtable in New York last month on preparing governments for the age of quantum computing. We had a mix of people in the room, folks from state government, national governments, academics, NGOs, companies, very nice mix of the ecosystem. And I think one of the things that we were very delighted to hear is starting to happen more and more is the City of New York had some colleagues who were teaming up with NYU students and faculty to start holding just experimentation spaces and sandboxes to better understand and prepare for application of AI. And so I think the fact that this experimentation is happening, it's happening in our academic spaces. Our next generation of public servants and everyone else is doing their best to get ready. And I think, again, for those of us who've already been out in the workforce for a minute, we also have an opportunity to get smarter on this topic. And we can approach it differently than we have, because we do have a little bit of time and we do have a little bit of space. And we can be better buyers of this type of technology for those rich countries that will be able to do so. We can be better users of this type of technology, and we can be better prepared for all of the downside risks that will certainly come with it between now and 2037.
Very good. So it was an impossible question, but I'll pose the same question on my next victim, which will be Tad. So Tad, what do you think should be the first use case that people should actually use with a functioning quantum computer?
Okay, so if we look at the U.S. economy, 17% of GDP is allocated towards healthcare, and so I actually think that that's one of the most promising areas is in the future if we can figure out a way to do drug discovery. Right now that's done with supercomputers. It takes a huge amount of time, and if that's something that we can speed up, would be amazing. But that kind of work requires the thousands to millions of qubits together, to actually model the molecules, the protein matching. So I think there's a lot to do there. I'm going to give you just a quick example. I'm sorry, back to MIT. I spent a lot of time there, so. On that same floor where we work is a researcher named Regina Barzilay. And she was forever she's a famous professor in natural language processing, so kind of AI, but like understanding language. And in her 40s, she developed breast cancer. So she went and had treatment over at MGH, which is just across the river, the Mass General. And in talking with her doctor, she said, well, how are you using all of the data on the scans and things that you're doing on me? You know, how does this get used after I'm done? And they say, well, it doesn't. And it shocked her so much that she recovered from the breast cancer. She shifted her research fully to making use of health data to solve problems. So like research went over, and she's one of the leading AI specialists in the world. So antibiotic discovery. So like she did first on detecting breast cancer in women, you know, can you beat a radiologist? She shifted over to looking for antibiotics. And so a couple years back, they announced there's this brand new, they discovered using AI, they discovered this new antibiotic that could be used for superbugs. And that's like a big discovery. And then a sentence down, she says, and we found 7 other likely candidates. So like within this short period of time, they identify these drugs. Now, that's done with like current computers and AI technologies. You can imagine if we do get to 2037 and my prediction holds, there's going to be a lot that we can do, personalized medicine. So I think that's probably one of the areas I'm most interested in.
Great. Okay. That's thanks. That would be a big breakthrough for humanity. Maybe a problem for the pension system. You know, if people live longer. But that's an aside. So, at the risk of being boring, I'm going to ask Sam the exact same question. So, Sam, now you're in the hot seat. If you had a functioning quantum computer that could actually solve real problems, what would you put it to?
Well, I think first of all, a lot of my hair would grow back. So I think I agree. The first area is definitely going to be in like molecular simulation and really focusing on those areas, which are quantum native, they're quantum problems. Because then you don't have this issue of embedding classical data and, beating what, by that time as well, who knows where GPUs are going to be? Who knows what the classical algorithms are? And I think this is one thing we also have to consider. It's not just when the quantum computer comes along, it's where is also modern GPU silicon hardware going to be alongside that. And so yeah, I think this is one area, quantum native drug discovery. But then also I think I would also be really interested to test where can quantum machine learning scale? And there's been a lot of debate in the academic circles about quantum machine learning. So we say, how can we use data? Can quantum get a deeper understanding? And currently as it is, people really have mixed views about it depending on who you ask. There's a lot of theoretical arguments for it and for not. And I think that most people will just say is, we won't be able to answer that question until we have that quantum computer to get the empirical evidence of will it actually give extra insights. But then we get back to this whole idea of where can we embed the data in a quantum way so that we would be able to get an advantage over just classical analysis. But for me, another interesting area and maybe more relevant in the banking sector is complex graph and network problems. And I find these boil down often to very hard optimization problems with a lot of recurrence, a lot of cycles. And this is an area where I see classical optimization algorithms and classical algorithms really breaking down, especially when you then start to scale this to, real world-sized problems of countries, continents, of mapping all interactions there. You're going to have a lot of compute power to analyze the properties of the networks, find optimal paths, and one of the things I was interested in looking at was contagion in the networks. So supply chains, banking, and this again has a lot of feedback, and it's a very complex problem which is hard for a classical graph algorithm to do on scale, but a perfect quantum computer would be able to solve this very efficiently. So these are the kind of things I'm excited for, and this is where I say we can formulate these algorithms now. So we can think about how we can do it, and then we've just got to wait and incrementally test them as we're getting new improvements.
Good. Okay. So there is still homework to be done, even while we're waiting for 2037 or whenever it might be. So Varlam, You saw it coming. It's exactly the same question. What task would you like to solve with a working quantum computer, if you could?
I think this is probably the hardest question from your list because we are dealing with so much abstract technology as of now, and it's very difficult to translate into actual use cases. And I'm cautious about mentioning Monte Carlo simulations after the comments, but central banks rely a lot on simulations and stress testing macro picture. So Monte Carlo simulations could be dramatically more efficient with quantum computing optimization problem, which you mentioned for portfolio testing, as well as testing quantum encryption resilience. Could be use case applicable for banking sector.
Great. Okay, so maybe it'll help us to prevent the next financial crisis in Georgia in 2039. We can hope, right? Very good. Okay, thank you for being good sports and for giving your views on this. So I'm going to move to the risks and policy responses. So Tad, obviously the potential to break all the cryptography behind everything, not just crypto, but every core banking system and every encrypted email for that matter, even when Iljok and I email each other about speaking notes for DC FinTech Week. That sounds like a pretty important risk to me, at least in principle. And even if it's a tail risk, it's a tail risk with pretty high impact. So, we were talking about this also in the run-up to this. Should we all be panicking?
So I don't think so, but I'll take what other people have said here, that you shouldn't panic, but we should be preparing for it. Like, we don't know if this is going to happen, but we should be prepared ahead of time anyway. I think the harvest now, decrypt later, when we talk to financial service firms, this is a concern, that they're worried about this harvest now, decrypt later, when the technology does improve. But in terms of cybersecurity, is data getting stolen now? Yes. Account data is stolen all the time. So worrying about whether some government somewhere is going to be able to decrypt my information 20 years from now, they can get it some other way here. So really, when we talk to countries, a lot of our clients are interested. They're saying, what do we do about this, about this quantum and cybersecurity? And we say, well, the way you can defend yourself best is have good cyber hygiene now. And it's not about the fancy stuff. It's about getting 80%, do the top 6-7 things that you should be doing to keep your network safe, and you're going to be okay. That said, if you are designing new products and if you are working with vendors, you want to make sure that they're using quantum secure cryptography. So as part of our lab back in my last job, we built multi-party computation platforms. So to take encrypted data, compute over the top, and get a result without revealing the inputs. So we built these privacy-enhancing technologies. But we made sure that they were quantum secure. So we used lattice-based encryption so that even if, we're not worried about it for now, but even in the future, we're making sure that we have quantum safe computation in there. So I just think, remember the whole end-to-end encrypted? That used to be a big thing. You'd say, oh, my data is end-to-end encrypted. I think the next vision is going to be, it's going to be quantum secure, so that they're using some new technology to make it quantum secure. So that's something that we're going to look for.
Very good. So I'm going to turn to Corey next and just ask, what measures do you think that public servants and the private sector should take to manage the risks and prepare for this tail risk, at least, of post-quantum future?
Yeah, well, we've been asking that of the public servants who are in our network and who've been participating in our quantum. We have an online community of practice space for governments, and we have a dedicated quantum space. So we've got a lot of public servants in there who are asking these questions and thinking about all this in real time as well. So the kind of top 5 or so key themes that they have hit on is now is the time to be getting smart, building foundational knowledge, developing frameworks, particularly ethical frameworks, related, considering how we will approach access and equity issues. This technology will not be distributed evenly. It never is, and this one especially is going to be quite challenging for many, many parts of the world to access. So that is a big thing we can be thinking about now. And then I think the topic that resonated most and came up again in that roundtable we had last month I mentioned is considering what a like multi-stakeholder governance or kind of support network group. I'm just using words now. But someone likened it to like, what is the G7 for quantum, and how can we have a trustworthy body that we could look to, right? And so I think considering what that will be, there will need to be something, or many somethings. And so now is a good time to be working toward all of that. And John, because I gave you a hard time on that last question, I will tell you, in terms of a substantive use case, the New Yorkers last month, we asked, well, what is the thing that your students want to experiment on? What is it that they want to try to, apply toward quantum? It will not surprise any of you that the topic most of these students wanted to work on was solving traffic problems in New York.
Good, okay. I'm still encouraged that we're solving, we're finding new drugs, we're solving traffic. It's not just, making Citadel more money in picking stocks or whatnot. So it's good. It's very good. So Sam, I wanted to ask you next, where do you see the greatest risks, but also the most promising responses? And what sage advice would you give to clients and partner institutions around the world in this?
I mean, I think I agree with everything which has been said, and I think there's no harm in being quantum secure in the future, right? There's no, adding an extra boulder in your door is not going to really, lead you to any harm. It's better to be prepared than not prepared, especially with new systems, right? It's not that hard to do a new system and get that prepared with these new algorithms. Maybe there's a bit more money to invest in migrating old systems, but, it's worth it there. In terms of the risk, I also think this is a great point about regulation and who's going to have access to a quantum computer. And this is one of the things I like to bring up a lot, but I think a lot of people kind of neglect is if there was a real working quantum computer, not everyone's going to be able to use it. Like even the banks, Goldman Sachs isn't going to be able to just suddenly use a quantum computer. Like this is going to have real defense issue, defense, it's a national security issue. So to actually get regulated use on a quantum computer is the first hurdle. How are they going to access it? How are they going to screen algorithms being ran on the quantum computer to make sure they're not for malicious intent? And then we also come down to this, and we kind of see this, I know this from the Canadian ecosystem, is there's a lot more regulation in the materials and technology being exported and imported around building quantum computers. So there's also this layer of then, if the technology gets revealed, we've got to also present, I see black market quantum computers possibly being a thing. So these are the layers we really have to consider, not just about the algorithm, but then the infrastructure, access, and again, I like to say, if you can access IBM quantum computer now, then there's no risk of it. Because why would they let a student, be able to run something on IBM quantum computer for free? That's not a national defense issue right now. So yeah, I think that's my sage advice is, again, as always, be prepared, but I think there's going to be a lot more hurdles. And also, one more point I'll put out is also there's going to be a cost barrier. Running quantum computers is not cheap. So if you've ever tried to play around with these things, I think IBM's around $100 a minute. So you've got to also then balance Monte Carlo simulations. I can do it faster, but it's probably going to be 10,000 times more expensive than what maybe a couple of cents to run on a GPU. So you're going to really have to also choose those high-impact, high-value business problems to isolate that usage. And then I think that's where it can go through this, scanning through the algorithm. You can go through this whole regulatory framework of them being able to run on these confidential machines or highly regulated machines, not just your everyday compute for now. And I think once everybody's really confident the world is quantum secure, then maybe and the technology evolves to where we might be able to have a desktop quantum computer, maybe. And maybe, that's 100, 200 years down the line. But yeah.
If we do have one, will it still look like a garbage can, like the ones now? Like they all seem to...
Well, it depends if it's photonic or not. Because, this is the problem. There's all the we don't actually know which technology is going to win either, right? You've got ion traps, superconductors, then you've got the photonics, which run at room temperature. And I think this is one of the things which is hard to say to prepare fully for quantum algorithms and the quantum future is we don't know which technology is going to win. They're still all heavily in the R&D stage. And from then it will be, when we have that perfect quantum computer or a near perfect one, getting back to the researchers of what algorithms can we do. And even things like lattice-based methods, maybe there's going to be something we can do with this new type of quantum computer which was actually able to work. Maybe that has a trick which can undo these lattice. So there's going to be a continual kind of feedback loop. And I mean, that's really the reality of where we are. It's still a big science experiment, but maybe, I guess, in the world we are now, things can kind of come out of the lab quicker.
Very good. So, Varlam, I wanted to ask how you see the risks for the central bank, for the National Bank of Georgia, but also for the Georgian financial system. And what are the measures that you think that you should take, or that financial institutions should take, if this is a relevant tail risk?
So in terms of policy responses, let me share with you one story from my previous experience. I'm a big fan of making analogies. So 10 years ago, when I was in charge of operationals and cyber risks, one of the systemic banks, we got hacked by our neighborhood country from the north.
I think
in 2 hours, we know what happened. So we dealt with known knowns. In a couple of days, we transited from known knowns to known unknowns. So we found out the damage. And in terms of policy responses, we are dealing something which is like harvest now, decrypt later. We have unknown unknowns again. So policy response strategically should be fundamentally different. And then Georgia is not, unfortunately, a rich country, so we don't have ability to invest in R&D, so that to lead the quantum computer development. But on the positive side, the project LEAP recently conducted by BIS Innovation Hub, with leading by Bundesbank and Banque de France, they come up with quite optimistic conclusions, building VPN tunnel for transitioning payment data, quite sensitive with post-quantum encryption methods like Kuber and dilithium. And the performance was not affected. So I guess we need to start with the basics, like making inventory of agile encryption and know picture what is not agile, and start transforming. And also, as you mentioned, we have opportunity to build something from the scratch on the positive side, while building these privacy-enhancing technologies with quantum resilient encryption in mind. So that's future-oriented thinking and policy response.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to end, we're nearing the end of time, so I'm going to end with a speed round. I'll ask two very brief questions. The first one will be to Sam and Tad, and then the second one will be to Corey and to Varlam. So, as we heard just now from Varlam, I mean, we are, of course, in a somewhat charged geopolitical environment where, there is a clear first mover advantage to the jurisdiction which has breakthroughs in this area. So just as I asked you guys, what specific year you think that the quantum breakthrough would happen? If it happens, which jurisdiction do you think it might happen in? So start with you, Sam.
Oh, that's a tough one. And I mean, I think, where will you go? I mean, it's hard to know because everybody keeps everything under wraps, right? I mean, I think one of the biggest players right now, is definitely Quantinium. So UK-based. They tout they have the best qubits, they have the best technology. They're really pushing to say that next year they'll have something actually near production ready. But then over here we have IonQ already pushing out, trying to say we're going to be ready. It's hard to say because I'm not an engineer, so I don't know deep down what the actual nitty-gritty of the qubits is they're doing and how that scalability is going to come, because I think everybody can maybe have a 1,000 qubit system, but then how do you scale up to that million, 2 million? And that's really a huge research question, which I don't think anybody can answer. So I'm going to give the disappointing answer, John, that honestly, I don't know.
I heard UK in there, so a country of Alan Turing,
UK,
I can see.
There's a lot of investment in Canada as well, like a lot of research and development there. So I mean, we have D-Wave, Xanadu up in Canada, so that's a possibility. I would say it's definitely US, Canada, or the UK are the highest potential.
Okay, so very briefly, Tad, where do you put your money?
So I work for the World Bank, and we've got lots of member countries that I can't mention. So I think, to be politically correct, I'm going to bet on Sam's team in Canada.
Great. So, and then finally, a question, also for the international organizations room, for Corey and to Varlam. So where do you think that in this area, just in one sentence, where do you think that the international organizations should be focusing efforts, if at all, on issues around quantum?
Access and equity.
Access and equity, great. Varlam, final word?
Democratizing technology, democratizing and developing standards.
Excellent. So on this very hopeful note, thanks for that. I think we can wrap it up here. Thank you, everyone, for taking part in this panel. I've enjoyed it very much. And now, finally, in my role as MC for the day, so this concludes the international financial system layer for the day. So thank you, everyone, for taking part. We now have happy hour, so I understand that there will be the possibility to get a well-deserved drink and to then follow up with people bilaterally. So thanks, everyone, again.